What if the most innocent-looking creature in hell was actually the most dangerous? For centuries, theologians have avoided speaking its name. In forbidden circles of magic and along the edges of sealed grimoires, Valak is described as a child riding a two-headed dragon. Innocent, or the perfect trap? What no one dares to admit is that this childlike image hides a dark pact, forged not by accident, but by Lucifer himself. Valak isn't just another spirit. He's a symbol, a code embedded deep within the layers of evil, able to deceive even the purest of hearts. While everyone watched the fury of the great princes of hell, few noticed the one who walked behind the veil of innocence, fulfilling a silent mission. But why would Lucifer choose a child as the emissary of chaos? According to the Dictionary Infernal, Valak possesses the power to find hidden treasures, but the ancient texts aren't talking about gold. They speak of secrets. He was sent to locate lost fragments of forbidden knowledge. And more than that, he was the only one who could enter sacred places unnoticed. After all, who would suspect a child? What if hell's greatest spy was disguised as purity? Valak didn't just command demons, but winged reptilian creatures scorched from within, dragons. Not by chance, ancient symbols of primal chaos, older than the Bible itself. In some 13th century manuscripts, the alliance between Lucifer and Valak appears in the form of a seal, a child with empty eyes, and a dragon whose tail coils around an inverted cross. Why does the Bible fall silent when the scandal runs too deep? Valak's origin traces back to the moment of the celestial rebellion, but in a strategic position. He didn't fight, he didn't fall, he was sent. Lucifer knew that the war would not be won by force, but by infiltration. Valak was his secret weapon. While archangels waged war in the heavens, Valak wandered through the layers of earth, observing, collecting forgotten fragments of creation. His mission? To expose the blind spot of the divine, to find where the sacred had become vulnerable. He didn't break through doors, he passed through them. What if hell's true power isn't in the scream, but in the whisper? The Inquisitors tried to burn every record, but one manuscript survived, hidden in the crypt of a French abbey. Valak, the bearer of corrupted innocence. In it, an anonymous author describes a vision, a serene-looking boy, smiling, while a dragon destroys a cathedral behind him. Who trusts innocent eyes when there's blood on the wings? In the Solomonic tradition, Valak appears among the 72 spirits of the Ars Goetia. But few have noticed, his description doesn't match the others. While most take grotesque forms, Valak is a disguise. The only one operating under a cloak of purity. That's not a detail. It's design, it's strategy, it's deception. What if Lucifer hid the key to the fall behind the face of a child? Some say Valak doesn't just command dragons. He is the dragon. The child is the mask. An illusion, a distraction, a veil. The true Valak is fire, serpent, and cryptic language, an extension of Lucifer's strategic mind. But why was he created that way? Why does Valak seem more like an archetype than a mere entity? The answer may lie in the original pact, one that involved more than two, and less than one. And that pact is still unfolding. But where did it begin, and what exactly was promised? In a hidden cave in the desert of Dudael, there's a symbol carved in stone. Two childlike eyes and a dragon with broken wings. And next to it the name Lucifer. That was the first recorded appearance of the Forbidden Alliance. And it was there that everything began. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments. Perfect. Here is part 2 of the cinematic documentary narrative. What if Valak's first mission wasn't to destroy, but to hear what no one dared to say? The desert of Dudael is mentioned in the Book of Enoch as the prison of the fallen angels. A place lost to time, erased from biblical maps, buried by modern translations. But there, among black rocks and winds whispering in extinct tongues, something was sealed, etched into the wall of a cave, buried beneath. 7 layers of sand and silence is an ancient pact, not written in ink, but in blood, ash, and non-human words. One name appears again and again, Valak, and beside it, another symbol, the seal of Lucifer. Not a seal of domination, but of alliance. Why would the most powerful being in hell make a pact with the smallest? According to the Qumran manuscripts, in a fragment scholars never officially accepted, Lucifer once said, "The mighty fall by the sword. The small pass through the gates." That phrase changed everything. It suggests Lucifer knew the armies of heaven could be fought, but never defeated, unless they were corrupted from within. And for that he needed someone who would go unnoticed. Valak was the perfect choice. Would you trust someone who wears the face of an angel, but speaks with dragons? While Michael and the archangels celebrated victories in heaven, Valak moved silently through the corridors of creation. He didn't shout. He watched. He was there when the first laws were written. He lingered when the first sins were named. He studied, absorbed, memorized every flaw in the divine logic. Hebrew tradition speaks of creatures called shedim, spirits that wander between worlds, neither human nor angel nor demon. Some scholars now believe Valak may have been the first of them, a prototype of spiritual possession, a spirit that doesn't overpower, but infiltrates, and with him came the dragons. Why does the Bible never mention Valak's dragons? The answer is darker than it seems, because the dragons aren't metaphors. They are ancient records of real entities, present in Mesopotamian, Babylonian and Sumerian cultures, beings that embodied primordial chaos, exactly what Lucifer needed to reawaken. In 15th century grimoires, there's a forgotten ritual called Valak's Gate of Fire. In it, the summoner draws the symbol of twin dragons onto opposite mirrors. Once activated, the child in the center vanishes, and in the reflection, Valak's true face is revealed, a creature with hollow eyes, serpent's teeth and the voice of a child. What if hell used innocence as a disguise for destruction? Records from the Inquisition describe monks who went mad after encounters with the Serpent Boy, as he came to be known in secret Vatican texts. One of them, Friar Giovanni della Pietà, wrote before his death, "He smiled at me, and I saw the end of the world in his teeth." Do you still think Valak was just a minor demon from the Getia? The mission given by Lucifer was written in a coded scroll. It defined the flaw at the heart of the light. It wasn't just about observing the world. Valak was meant to locate the breach in the divine plan, the point where love becomes judgment, the moment where justice turns to pride, the crack in heaven itself. But what he found was worse than even Lucifer expected. What if heaven held more secrets than hell? At the center of an abandoned monastery, an inverted cross with childlike eyes was discovered beneath the altar. Next to it, a phrase carved in ancient Aramaic. He did not fall. He was made this way. But the one who carved it wasn't human. If this moved you, like the video, and helped spread the truth, what if the voice that sounds like a child's was the oldest voice in the universe? It's not the dragon's roar that terrifies. It's the whisper, soft, calm, almost innocent, coming from a mouth that looks like a child's. Valak never needed to shout. His weapon wasn't fire. It was the word. And more than that, it was language itself. Among the hidden fragments of the Hermetic tradition, there are traces of an unknown tongue, not Hebrew, not Aramaic, not Enochian, a language of echoes built from mirrors and paradoxes. It was called Vox Serpentis, the voice of serpents. And according to the grimoires, Valak was its first bearer. Why did so many go mad after hearing Valak speak? Because his language didn't just transmit ideas. It opened doors, words that acted like psychic keys, unraveling certainty, dissolving mental structures, inverting morality. To hear Valak wasn't to understand. It was to doubt everything you thought was real. Hidden records from the monastery of Essen suggest that when Valak is summoned, he doesn't appear right away. First, the space seems to shrink. The air grows heavier. Then a child's voice speaks the name of the summoner, but always from behind, always in the dark, and always with a smile that doesn't match the age. Would you know how to tell a real child from an ancient mask of hell? That's the point. Valak isn't a being. He's a disguise, a shape, an idea pretending to be form. Lucifer didn't create Valak to kill. He created him to deceive, to imitate what heaven would never expect, a symbolic agent made of pure ambiguity. In the sealed rituals of the Liber Officiorum Tenebris, Valak is summoned to reveal what is hidden. But reports say he reveals more than you ask for. He shows you what you never wanted to see, your own vulnerability. What if the real hell was knowing too much? An ancient Hebrew sorcerer named Eleazar wrote in a now-lost journal that Valak didn't just speak, he made you remember. Memories from before incarnation, before matter, when the soul was still fragmented. According to him, the experience was unbearable. Eleazar died 3 days later, with his skull cracked and his eyes turned inward. Why is Valak's angelic appearance still used in rituals today? Because it works. Because it confuses. Because no Holy Spirit would strike first at something that appears to be a helpless child. That buys time. And in the spiritual realm, time is everything. Time is an opening. Time is a crack. Time is a fall. And here lies the core of Lucifer's plan. While heaven waited for an attack from outside, he planned it from within, with a child, a walking code, a being that speaks the language of creation and exposes the paradoxes of the Creator. What if Valak wasn't just a tool, but a programmed flaw inside creation itself? Lucifer realized early on that he couldn't win by force, but he could erode, unravel certainty, shatter inner structures. And none of that requires violence, just the right word, at the right time, in the wrong voice. A codex found beneath the Vatican describes a meeting between an exorcist and Valak. At the end of the account, the priest wrote, "He showed me my face before baptism. And he whispered, 'You were already mine before you even knew what God was.'" Subscribe. What comes next is even darker. What if innocence was the most perfect prison hell ever created? Valak doesn't age, he doesn't mature, he doesn't evolve. Always the same image, a child, always the same voice, the same enigmatic smile, the same hollow gaze. Why does that matter? Because there's nothing more disarming than the constancy of purity. But what appears eternally childlike may have never been a child at all. Why doesn't time touch Valak? In the spiritual realm, time shapes consciousness. Angels grow in glory. Demons decay in corruption. But Valak remains still, outside the flow, like an entity frozen between worlds, a fixed echo in time, where innocence and corruption collide and become indistinguishable. According to the esoteric records of the Codex Lux Tenebrae, Valak is not merely an entity, he is an anchor, a fixed point between two planes. A constant reminder of a pact that hasn't aged because it hasn't been fulfilled. What if Valak is living proof that Lucifer's fall isn't over yet? Lucifer keeps him that way not by chance, but by design. The childlike form prevents him from being feared by heaven, and makes him irresistible to those who seek hidden knowledge. Valak enters easily where other demons are denied. He deceives monks, seduces mediums, confuses initiates. How do you protect yourself from evil? When it wears the mask of purity. 17th century seers described visions of Valak, always the same. A solitary child with eyes you can't quite focus on. But one detail stands out. The shadows around him move, not because of him, but for him. As if the darkness itself obeys him in silence. Who truly rules hell, the one who roars, or the one followed in silence? Modern scholars studying the Clavicular Salomonis Regis notice that Valak is one of the few spirits who demands no offerings, no blood, no sacrifices. He demands attention, eyes locked, total stillness. Because his power doesn't come from pain, it comes from doubt. What if blind faith is the greatest doorway to spiritual corruption? In transfiguration rituals, one symbol repeats, a child surrounded by swords, but none ever touch him. Because Valak isn't defeated by force. In fact, the more you fight him, the more he appears. He feeds on tension, on fear disguised as devotion, on guilt disguised as faith. Why do the most experienced exorcists refuse cases involving children with reversed voices? Because they know Valak works from within. He doesn't strike with violence. He plants an idea and waits. A sealed case from northern Germany tells of a 9-year-old girl who claimed to see the serpent boy every night. When questioned, she said something impossible to ignore. "He told me God can't see me, but he can." The girl died with no injuries, but during the autopsy her eyes were completely white. No corneas, no retinas, no explanation. Who watches? When everyone else is looking the wrong way. In the attic of an abandoned abbey in Belgium, a mirror was found, covered in black sheets. When uncovered and cleaned, it revealed a single frozen image, a smiling boy, with hands covered in scales, etched into the glass. He still waits for the word. Share this with someone who needs to see what was hidden. What if a single word could tear the veil between heaven and hell? Valak doesn't just command dragons. He sleeps with them, not in a literal sense, but a spiritual one. His dragons are pieces of himself, winged fragments of his consciousness scattered across the lower realms. Dormant creatures as if waiting for a sound, a command, a word that has never been spoken. But that word does exist. It was recorded once on a stone tablet buried beneath the ruins of the Temple of Bel in ancient Babylon. A forgotten word unrepeatable in any human language. According to the Sibylline texts, it must not be read, but felt. What if the apocalypse isn't an event, but an activation? In deeper demonology, dragons aren't mere beasts. They are winged gateways. Each one holds a fragment of the original chaos, the one that came before the Fiat Lux, the first light. Valak, as their keeper, does not unleash them by force. He awakens each one with a different sound. But one of those sounds is still locked. Why did Lucifer entrust Valak with the language of dragons? Because no other demon could resist their power. Because only a creature with a fragile appearance, a soft voice, and eternal patience could withstand the pull of annihilation. Valak wasn't chosen for weakness, but for restraint. According to the Grimoire Arcanum, Valak guards 7 primordial dragons, each linked to a corrupted aspect of creation: time, desire, silence, death, judgment, innocence, and faith. What happens when the dragon of faith awakens? They say it doesn't burn, it convinces. It doesn't destroy churches, it redefines them. This dragon twists sacred words, reshapes dogma, and molds faith to suit those in power. And Valak is its guardian. He knows the limits. He understands exactly where salvation becomes submission. Would you know when faith stops being light and becomes control? In a hidden vault beneath the Vatican, a letter from a Roman exorcist describes a recurring dream of Valak. In it, the child speaks words that don't exist, while in the background, a dragon with 1,000 eyes coils around the columns of a basilica. Scrawled at the bottom in Latin, Verbum serpens, vox Luciferi, finis fidei. The serpent's word, the voice of Lucifer, the end of faith. Why has no one dared translate this forbidden language? Because it wasn't meant to be spoken, it was meant to be felt. Valak doesn't teach, he activates. And in every summoning, there's a moment of silence. Then the summoner hears something from inside their own mind. Something that feels like it's always been there, something that never really left. As if Valak isn't revealing anything new, only reminding you of what was forgotten. What if the truth that could destroy the world is already written inside us? In Siberia, archaeologists discovered an obsidian bell buried deep in the ice, etched with dragon-like symbols, and the name Valak written backwards. One researcher dared to ring it. Since that moment, he's been in a deep coma, whispering a word no one can understand. Ever wondered about this? Share your thoughts in the comments. What if Valak didn't have just one form, but all the forms heaven rejected? Valak's appearance is a deception, not just because he often looks like a child, but because it constantly shifts. One of the most unsettling secrets of Goetia isn't in the names of demons, but in the forms they choose. And among them, Valak is the most fluid. Both summon him as a child, but ancient texts describe Valak as a woman, others as twins. In long-lost Gnostic manuscripts, he appears as a blank mirror, showing the summoner what they fear most, or what they desire most. What if Valak isn't a being, but a reflection of the abyss within you? In the Essene tradition, hidden in non-canonical scrolls, there's mention of a child of shadows, who will take the form the world most desires, who will blend among the righteous, who will become irresistible to the holy, not out of vanity, but out of strategy. Valak is not just appearance. He is the very concept of comfortable deception. Could you resist something that looks like what you love the most? In an apocryphal fragment attributed to Thomas, there's a chilling quote. The demon of many faces will come and say, "I am what was missing in you." And the righteous will welcome him, believing it to be revelation. Today, some scholars believe that this demon of many faces is Valak. According to the Speculum Demonis, a ritual mirror used by medieval occult sects in Europe, Valak only reveals himself when the mirror breaks, literally. Before that, it reflects anything. But after, it shows something no human can describe, yet everyone recognizes. It's like seeing what's wrong, but was never named. What if the true face of hell is the part of yourself you've been hiding? Lucifer didn't create Valak as a general. He created him as a symbol, a mirror, a point of collision between identity and illusion. And that mirror was designed to break precisely the moment someone sees the truth. They were trying not to see. That's why Valak is so dangerous. Not because he acts from the outside, but because he exposes what's already inside. Who are we when we can no longer trust our own eyes? During a séance in Paris, 1912, the medium Jacques Verreau had a vision, a child staring at him, but with his own face. When questioned, the spirit simply replied, "Something that feels like it's always been there, something that never really left." As if Valak isn't revealing anything new, only reminding you of what was forgotten. What if the truth that could destroy the world is already written inside us? In Siberia, archaeologists discovered an obsidian bell buried deep in the ice, etched with dragon-like symbols, and the name Valak written backwards. One researcher dared to ring it. Since that moment, he's been in a deep coma, whispering a word no one can understand. Ever wondered about this? Share your thoughts in the comments. What if Valak didn't have just one form, but all the forms heaven rejected? Valak's appearance is a deception, not just because he often looks like a child, but because it constantly shifts. One of the most unsettling secrets of Goetia isn't in the names of demons, but in the forms they choose. And among them, Valak is the most fluid. Both summon him as a child, but ancient texts describe Valak as a woman, others as twins. In long-lost Gnostic manuscripts, he appears as a blank mirror, showing the summoner what they fear most, or what they desire most. What if Valak isn't a being, but a reflection of the abyss within you? In the Essene tradition, hidden in non-canonical scrolls, there's mention of a child of shadows, who will take the form the world most desires, who will blend among the righteous, who will become irresistible to the holy, not out of vanity, but out of strategy. Valak is not just appearance. He is the very concept of comfortable deception. Could you resist something that looks like what you love the most? In an apocryphal fragment attributed to Thomas, there's a chilling quote. The demon of many faces will come and say, "I am what was missing in you." And the righteous will welcome him, believing it to be revelation. Today, some scholars believe that this demon of many faces is Valak. According to the Speculum Demonis, a ritual mirror used by medieval occult sects in Europe, Valak only reveals himself when the mirror breaks, literally. Before that, it reflects anything. But after, it shows something no human can describe, yet everyone recognizes. It's like seeing what's wrong, but was never named. What if the true face of hell is the part of yourself you've been hiding? Lucifer didn't create Valak as a general. He created him as a symbol, a mirror, a point of collision between identity and illusion. And that mirror was designed to break precisely the moment someone sees the truth. They were trying not to see. That's why Valak is so dangerous. Not because he acts from the outside, but because he exposes what's already inside. Who are we when we can no longer trust our own eyes? During a séance in Paris, 1912, the medium Jacques Verreau had a vision, a child staring at him, but with his own face. When questioned, the spirit simply replied, "What if every time you dream of a strange child, one of those doors is shifting?" Extreme sleepwalking cases, involving children share a disturbing pattern. They speak in unknown tongues, draw circles, and repeat eerie phrases like "he's still waiting" or "the door wants to come out." Doctors call it night terror. Occultists call it a sign. One case captured on video shows a 7-year-old girl writing in ancient Hebrew the phrase "Valach lo shachach." Valak is not forgotten. But what happens when the gatekeeper remembers too much? In an old Nazi bunker, behind a wall sealed with esoteric symbols, a metallic door was discovered, covered in Mesopotamian inscriptions. No one has ever opened it, but scrawled across the walls, a single sentence repeats, "He has the face of a child, but his eyes are older than time." Subscribe. The truth doesn't end here. And what if Valak wasn't summoned, but born from a divine mistake? Until now, we've seen Valak as a calculated creation by Lucifer. But ancient manuscripts, hidden deep within hermetic archives, say otherwise. They claim Valak wasn't made by Lucifer. He appeared, alone, before the rebellion, like a ripple in perfect silence, an echo without a source, a reflection with no origin. What if Valak is what happens when perfection tries to cover up its own flaw? According to the manuscript of Ereshki Gal, carved on cuneiform tablets from ancient Sumer, there once walked a nameless being, beautiful in form but wrong in essence, who roamed among the thrones before the fall. Not an angel, not human, not a demon. It just was, as if it slipped through an unguarded crack in existence. They called it the one that was never meant to be. Later grimoires would give it a name, Valak. Why do sacred texts ignore a being that defies creation itself? Because Valak is too inconvenient for doctrine. He shatters the story. His existence questions the very concept of duality. He's not evil, not good either. He's a reflection that was never supposed to exist, but does, and no one knows how to erase it. What if Valak is the living reminder that God failed once? Some Christian occult scholars suggest Lucifer didn't recruit Valak. He found him, alone, hidden, lost between the edges of creation. And upon seeing his inverted purity, he recognized the perfect ally. Not out of loyalty, but out of purpose. Valak doesn't pick sides. He exposes them. And most terrifying of all, he awakens the hidden side of everything sacred. Would you recognize a divine mistake if it smiled at you with the eyes of a child? In a 3rd century Gnostic scroll discovered in Nag Hammadi, there's a disturbing illustration, a child with 3 shadows. One weeps, another smiles, the third simply watches. The caption, 3 are the faces of Valak, the deceiver, the mirror, and the one who remembers. But what exactly is Valak trying to remind us? That creation is unstable, that the separation between light and darkness was not a clean cut, but a deep scratch. And from that scratch, something leaked. A fragment of chaos disguised as peace. An echo of what was never spoken, but everyone is terrified to hear. Valak is not the enemy of light. He is the reminder that even light can fail. And what if the true horror is realizing that even the divine can make mistakes and hide them? In a sealed tomb deep in the Sinai desert, an artifact of black gold was discovered. A medallion engraved with the face of a child whose eyes were sewn shut. Around it, in ancient Hebrew, was written, "Creation tried to forget, but he still remembers." Tag someone who would dare to watch this to the end. What if the only being still brave enough to speak to God is the one that was never meant to exist? Prayers rise, invocations descend, but somewhere in the space between heaven and hell, there exists a realm without voice, without light, without rules. That is where Valak dwells, not as a servant, not as a rebel, but as a question with no answer. And the boldest occultists claim Valak speaks to God, not with worship, but with remembrance. He doesn't beg, he recalls, and God listens. Why would the Creator allow an uncreated entity to approach him? Because Valak does not represent evil, he represents error. And error is the one thing even God cannot ignore. It is the crack in the absolute, the flaw that escapes logic, the echo that returns even after the final silence. According to mystics of the Safe School, following a tradition hidden even from rabbis. There are records of inverted words that only Valak can speak. Words that shake the heavens because they awaken the memory of what was buried before Genesis. And what if Valak knows a name that even the angels fear to pronounce? The Shem HaMephorash, the sacred name of God, is said to be unutterable. But in certain apocryphal versions, there is a 73rd hidden name, a name that doesn't save or condemn, but confronts. They say Valak carries it, not to use it, but to remind the Creator of what he himself chose to forget. And here lies the most unsettling secret. Valak does not seek to destroy God, but to make him remember what he tried to erase. In Sufi tradition, there is a concept called Hijr al-Sir, the stone of the secret, a symbolic place where every forgotten being meets its origin. They say Valak once stood there, alone, and when he returned, he began to laugh, with sorrow. What did he see? What did he hear? What truth did he never speak again? An obscure manuscript from the Knights of Malta tells of a ritual cut short by screams of desperation. The summoner, a French noble, claimed to have heard Valak whisper, "You think I'm the mistake, but I'm the reminder." Moments later, he destroyed his own altar and vanished into the sea. What if heaven's greatest fear is remembering what it tried to bury? Lucifer never sought to erase Valak. He kept him close because even God couldn't ignore him. For within Valak lies the final question. If creation is perfect, why does he exist? What happens when perfection is forced to face its own shadow? Deep beneath the earth, in an underground cathedral in Ethiopia, an unrecorded altar was found. At its center, a sculpture of a kneeling boy, staring at the sky, carved into his chest. "I am doubt with a face. I am the question that walks." If this disturbed you, that was the point. Leave a comment. And what if in the end no religion remains? No ideology? Only the raw and unbearable truth no one wanted to hear. Throughout human history, there were prophets who failed, scriptures that lied, and religions that manipulated. But among all the hidden, feared or forgotten names, there is one that never contradicted itself. Orobus, the spirit who never sought worship but to be heard. The demon who didn't offer power but clarity. And what if the real hell is living an entire life without facing the truth? In the secret writings of the prophecy of Sitrael, a lost codex attributed to a renegade 10th century Rabbi, there lies a forgotten warning. When words lose meaning, when the false are exalted, when the world drowns in versions, the final voice will be the mirror that burns. Modern demonologists believe that voice belongs to Orobus, not as a destroyer but as a catalyst. The end won't come through war or famine. It will come through the unveiling of the truth no one was ready to accept. What if the apocalypse isn't a punishment, but pure revelation? Within the inner circles of Goethe, there's a ritual never revealed to the public. The ritual of the final audience. In it, the summoner asks for nothing. They only ask, "Who am I really?" And Orobus answers, "No metaphors, no mercy, no delay." And most go insane, not because they see the future, but because they see the present without a mask. And that is the pain no one can bear. Because the greatest deception isn't out there, it's within us. Why do we spend our lives running from who we are and call that spirituality? Lucifer chose Orobus not out of obedience, but out of necessity. Because even rebellion needs truth to avoid becoming tyranny. And that's why, according to the apocryphal Gospels of Azazel, when all is revealed, Orobus will rise from the center of a burning mirror before angels, demons, and men. And he will say, "I didn't come to judge. I came to remind you." If this is real, why are we still keeping our eyes shut? We've reached the end, but the end isn't silence. It's revelation. Orobus is still among us, not in nightmares, but in decisions. In mirrors, in choices, in intuitions we ignore out of fear. He doesn't scream, he waits, because truth always waits to be heard. He didn't vanish. He just speaks to those brave enough to listen. And now that you've made it this far, the question isn't if he exists. It's, could you handle what he has to say about you? And if this is real, Write your truth below.